Hello there, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. This story is The Bell from Hans Christian Andersen. In the narrow streets of the big city, in the evening, when the sun was setting and the clouds glistened like gold up among the chimneys, first one person and then another would hear a strange sound, like the peal of a church bell. But it would be heard only for a moment, as there would be such a rumbling of carriages and such a noise of people that is disturbing. "The evening bell is tolling," they would say. "The sun is setting." Those who went outside the city, where the houses stood farther apart, and there were gardens and small fields, saw the evening sky more beautiful still, and heard the bell peal more loudly. It was as if the sound came from a church deep in the silent, sweet-smelling woods, and people would look there and grow quite solemn. As time passed, one person would say to another, "I wonder if there's a church in those woods. That bell has such a strange and lovely tone. Let's go and have a look." And the rich people would take to their carriages and the poor people to their legs. But it would seem such a strangely long way to them. And when they came to a lot of willow trees growing at the edge of the wood, they would sit down and look into the long branches, and think that now they were really in the country. The town confectioner came out and pitched a tent, and then there came another confectioner who hung up a bell outside his tent, a bell which had been tarred so as to stand the rain, and which had no clapper. And then when people went back home, they would say it had been most romantic, which is really saying something. 3 persons declared they had penetrated the wood as far as it ended, and had kept hearing the strange pealing, but to them it seemed to come from inside the city. One of them wrote quite a song about it, saying that the bell had the sound of a mother speaking to a beloved and intelligent child. There was no melody more lovely than the pealing of the bell. News of the bell also reached the emperor, who promised that whoever found out where the sound came from should receive the title of World Bell Ringer, even if it proved not to be a bell. By now, many people went to the woods to get a living there, but there was only one who came back with any sort of explanation. No one had been far enough, not even he. Yet he said that the pealing came from a very big owl in a hollow tree. It was such a wise old owl, and it continually beat its head against the tree. But whether the pealing came from its head or from the hollow trunk, he couldn't say for certain. And so he was made World Bell Ringer, and every year wrote a short paper about the owl, though no one was any the wiser. Now it was Confirmation Day, and the vicar had spoken beautifully and feelingly. The young people had been so greatly moved. This was an important day for them. From children they had suddenly become grown up, their childish minds turning, as it were, to wiser thoughts. It was the loveliest of sunny days. The young people went out of the city, and from the woods came, wonderfully loud, the pealing of the big, unknown bell. Hearing it, they felt a great urge to find it, all except 3. One of these had to go home to try on her party dress, for it was on account of this very dress and the party that she had this time been confirmed, or she would never have been there. The second was a poor boy who had borrowed his confirmation suit and shoes from the landlord's son, and had to return them by a certain time. The third said that he never went to any strange place without his parents, and that he had always been a good boy, and would go on being one now he had been confirmed, and that's not a thing to make fun of, though they did. And so 3 of them went no further, while the rest trudged along. The sun was shining and the birds singing, and the young people joined in the singing, holding one another by the hand, for they had yet to be given jobs, and were newly confirmed in the presence of our Lord. Soon, however, Two of the smallest of them grew tired, and so these two turned back towards the city. Two little girls sat down and made daisy chains, and they, too, got no further. And when the rest of them reached the willow trees, where the confectioner lived, they said, "Well, here we are. There's no such thing as a bell. It's all imagination." Then all at once, deep inside the wood, the bell pealed out so sweetly and so solemnly that 4 or 5 decided after all to go further into the wood. It was so dense, so leafy, that it was hard work making headway. Woodruff and anemones grew almost too tall. Flowering convolvuluses and brambles hung in long festoons from tree to tree, and there the nightingale sang, and the sunbeams played. Oh, it was wonderful. But it was no place for girls. They would have got their dresses torn. Big boulders lay there, overgrown with mosses of every color, and the fresh spring water bubbling up, making a strange cluck-cluck-clucking sound. "Could this be the bell?" said one of the young people, lying down and listening. "We must look into this," and so he stayed behind, leaving the others to go on. They came to a house made from bark and branches. A big crabapple tree overhung it, as though to shake all its blessings off onto the roof, which was covered in roses. The long branches were clinging to the gable, and from this hung a small bell. Would this be the one they had all heard? Yes, they all agreed that it was, all except one. He said that this bell was too small and delicate to be heard at the distance they had heard it, and that they were quite different tones which had stirred them. The one who said this was a prince, and so the other said, "A fellow like him always knows best." And so they left him to go by himself, and as he went his breast became fuller and fuller with the solitude of the wood. Yet still he heard the little bell, which had so pleased the others, and now and then could also hear, as the wind blew from the confectioner's, the singing of people who were having tea. But the peals of the deep bell sounded even louder. It was as though an organ played with it. The sound came from the left, the side where the heart is. All at once there was a rustle in the bushes, and standing in front of the prince was a little boy, wearing clogs, and a jacket which was so short that you could easily see his long wrists. They knew each other. The boy was the very one who had been unable to go on, because he had had to go home and return the suit and shoes to the landlord's son. He had done so, and now, in his clogs and his poor clothes, had started off alone, for the pealing of the bell had been so loud that he had had to come. "Why, then, we can walk along together," said the prince. But the poor boy in the clogs was very shy, and tugging at the short sleeves of his jacket, he said that he was afraid he couldn't walk so fast. Besides, he thought that the bell would be found on the right, where everything great and grand was to be found. "Why, then we shall never meet," said the prince, and he nodded to the poor boy, who went into the darkest and densest part of the wood, where the thorns tore his poor clothes and scratched his face, hands, and feet. The prince, too, got some nice scratches, but the sun shone on his path, and he is the one we will follow, for he was a smart lad. "I will find the bell," he said, "if I have to go to the ends of the earth for it." Horrid monkeys sat up in the trees, grinning and baring their teeth. "Let's pelt him," they said. "Let's pelt him, he's a prince." But he walked steadily on, deeper and deeper into the wood, to where the most wonderful flowers were growing. There were starry white lilies with blood-red stamens, sky-blue tulips which sparkled in the breeze, and apple trees, on which the apples looked for all the world like big, shining soap bubbles. Think how these trees must have glistened in the sunshine. All round the loveliest green meadows, where stags and hinds were frolicking in the grass, grew splendid oaks and beeches, and there a tree had split its bark, there would be grass and long creepers growing in the crack. There were also big glades with peaceful lakes where white swans swam about, flapping their wings. The prince would often stand still and listen, thinking that it was from one of these deep lakes that the bell pealed up to him. But then he would find that it wasn't from there that the bell tolled, but from still deeper in the wood. And now the sun went down. The sky glowed a fiery red. It grew silent, so very silent, in the wood, and he fell upon his knees, sang his evening hymn, and said, "Never shall I find what I seek. The sun is setting, and then will come the night, the dark night. Yet even now I may see the round red sun once more before it sinks quite down behind the earth. I'll climb the rocks over there. They rise to the height of the tallest trees." And seizing hold of brambles and creepers, he climbed up the wet boulders, where there were wriggling snakes, and the toad almost barked at him. But up he got, before the sun had quite set, as seen from that height. Oh, what grandeur! The sea, the great glorious sea, beating its long waves against the shore, lay outstretched before him, and the sun stood out like a great shining altar at the meeting point of the sea and sky. Everything was fused in glowing colors. The wood sang and the sea sang, and his heart sang with them. All nature was a great and holy temple, of which trees and floating clouds were the pillars, flowers and grass the woven velvet carpet, the sky itself the great dome. Up there the red colors went out as the sun disappeared, but millions of stars were lit, and then millions of diamond lamps shone out. And the prince stretched his arms toward the sky, towards the sea and the woods, and at that very moment, along the right-hand path, came the poor boy with the short sleeves and the clogs. He had arrived there just as quickly, arrived by his own way. And they ran forward to meet each other, and clasped each other by the hand in the great temple of nature and poetry. And over their heads pealed the invisible holy bell, with blessed spirits danced airily around them to the sound of a jubilant hallelujah. The Bell by Hans Christian Andersen. Thank you so much for listening. Good night, everybody.